Hello, everyone. I'm Valora Washington, CEO of the CAYL Institute, that's Community Advocates for Young Learners. And it is always my pleasure once again to welcome you to the CAYL Catalyst webinar series every first Thursday of the month from 4:00 p.m. Eastern Time. We are here to offer you important conversations about children, families, and the early childhood education profession. All of our webinars are free, recorded, available on our website, and there's closed captioning available. If you want to interact with our panelists and you're listening to this live, please click the link that we put in the chat at the end of the webinar. And we encourage you to share your ideas with us in the chat as we have this conversation today. So we're so happy to know that we're here because we have been doing this work for 20 years. This has been our 20th anniversary year, and we had the theme of showing up with courage, which was a really important theme for us in this year. And so we want to thank the Schott Foundation, which was our original sponsor and is also the sponsor of this year's webinar series, for all they have done for children and educators over these past 20 years. And if you'd like to join us, if you've been enjoying this webinar series, which we offer without cost, we invite you to make a tax-deductible donation to the CAYL Institute of any amount, and you can text 53555 to do so. We really want to thank you for this year that you've showed up with courage. We want to thank you for your boldness. We want to thank you for your willingness to name the elephants in the room. We know how you've showed up with courage this year, as we've talked about many critical and heartfelt issues in our field. You have definitely inspired us. We've learned so much from you. You've shared your ideas, your hopes, your dreams, your concerns. We've heard this year from many legendary leaders in our field, and from the practitioners who show up every day in their settings with power. Over 12,000 of you have subscribed to this webinar series this year, including our colleagues from 56 different countries who listen to this webinar. Thank you. And we send our love and our very best wishes as we end the year, and we look forward to the year ahead. We're so grateful that you've joined us and each other as we try to shine a light on how we need to move forward in our work with young children. We've used several symbols this year to think about showing up with courage. And one of the most important ones is this idea of Sankofa, because we are a people and a profession that, like the Sankofa bird, we're looking back, but we're moving forward. We've also brought forward the idea of Aquafina, which is a symbol of courage and valor, strength, heroism, leadership, and bravery. Together, these two symbols symbolize our profession. It symbolizes our webinar series in 2024 of showing up with courage. And it shows our focus on you and how we really thank you every day for the work that you do. You've shown up with courage in so many ways. We'd like you to write in the chat and show us how you've showed up with courage and what you're doing right. We're ending our series by once again asking you to show up with courage to think about racial and gender inequities in our field. You know what? This is a tough talk, and it seems to be getting tougher. Some of us are finding ourselves in moments of despair. But whenever you find yourself doubting how far you can go, just remember how far we have come, everything that we face, all the battles that we've won, all the fears we have overcome. And as it has been said, we've been given this life because we are strong enough to live it. If someone says that things are going wrong, don't go with them. We're showing up with courage. And as Joel Osteen said, sometimes we face difficulties not because we're doing something wrong, but just because we're doing something right. You've shown up with courage so much this year. We'd love you to write in the chat and tell us, what are you doing right? Tell us more about what you're doing to show up with courage. As you know, we've had an agreement with Exchange Magazine, and early in 2025, you should hear from Exchange and us talking about what we've learned from the field as they've been showing up with courage. Today's panelists are going to give us some more real talk. They're going to give us some real talk about courage, about power, about being bold. And so We want to listen to them and hear what we need to hear to be strong and stay strong in this year. We're going to hear from Dr. Megan Pamela Ruth Madison. She's a political educator and a lifelong student of radical Black feminism. She began her work in our field as a preschool classrooms across the Midwest, where she's from, and she facilitates professional learning for teachers across the country on anti-bias education. We're also going to hear from Rukia Rogers, who's worked with young children and families for over 30 years, including work as a preschool and toddler teacher, a studio teacher, and a curriculum coordinator. She's someone who believes that education is rooted in liberation, and when that happens, it creates connections between the world that we envision and the daily work that we do as practitioners. We're also going to hear from Ijumaa Jordan. Ijumaa describes herself as a fat, Black, cisgender woman who is doing the internal and external work to abolish systems of oppression such as racism, sexism, transphobia, and classism. Wow. I am so excited by this panel. I'm particularly excited by this panel because this year, as we've showed up with courage, we've really brought to you a lot of our legacy leaders. And what we're going to hear today is what some of our younger educators have to say. So pull up a seat and be encouraged as we take a look at gender and race in our field. And we are going to start with you, Megan. Welcome. So delighted to have you on the CAYL Catalyst webinar series. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Valora. Thank you for the work that you do every single day, and thank you for bringing us together today. Thank you, CAYL, and thank you to everybody who's joining us and joining us in the moment and also joining us in the future as you listen to this recording. I am overjoyed to be here today, perhaps especially because I get to be here with two women whom I deeply admire and cherish. When Valora invited me to attend this podcast and asked who I'd be interested in being in conversation with, it wasn't hard. I was very clear. I want to be in conversation with Rukia Monique Rogers and Ijumaa Jordan. And for good reason. Rukia, you'll hear from her in a moment, is a visionary leader. She's my role model. She's who I want to be when I grow up. She founded and directs one of the few early childhood programs on Turtle Island that I know of, at least, that actually practices all 4 goals of anti-bias education, including goals 3 and 4, justice and activism. And the way that they do it at the Highlander School does that work with families and children at the center. I honestly believe if you read one early childhood book this year, it should be Rukia's book. After you hear from Rukia, you'll get a chance to hear from Ijumaa. And Ijumaa is also someone I deeply admire and cherish because Ijumaa is my mentor and my bestie. She's the person who introduced me to Rukia in the first place. And when I ran, was elected, and served on the NAEYC governing board under the first Trump presidency, it was Ijumaa who behind the scenes was coaching and supporting me. So in very clear and real terms, there would be no advancing equity in early childhood education position statement if not for Ijumaa's mentorship. When I was thinking about putting together this group of people in conversation, we had some concerns about diversity. All 3 of us are Black women, all 3 of us are abolitionists, but I do think it's also important to name that when we understand diversity more deeply, that also means understanding within group differences. Not all Black women and not all abolitionists are the same. And there's a lot for us to learn when we pay attention to the differences in our approaches and our strategies. I think this is particularly important in the wake of Kamala Harris's unsuccessful campaign for president, and it's important always. So as you listen, keep in mind that while we're all 3 Black women abolitionist early childhood educators, we have different approaches to the work. We have come up in different freedom and organizing traditions. We are anchored in different faith backgrounds. We play different roles in the early childhood field and have had different career trajectories. We have different personalities. And we're also based in different geographies. I'm based on Lenape land in Harlem, also known as New York City. Rukia is based in Atlanta. Ijumaa is on the other coast. So with that, I'll stop talking and let us get to the heart of today's conversation. But I just want to say thank you, Valora. Thank you to everyone for being here. And thank you in advance, Rukia and Ijumaa, for making the time for this conversation.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I couldn't imagine a better moment in time to have a conversation. It's want to pause and just say I'm honored to be here to share my own thoughts and the work of the Highlander School. It's an important time considering where our nation is at and where we want to go as a local community, but also as a global community. You heard a little bit about me, and I'll share just a little bit more. Again, my name is Rukia Rogers. I'm a native of Wisconsin, but I've called Atlanta, Georgia, my home for over 25 years. I'm a gardener. I'm a child, a rights advocate. I'm an empath. I'm a Leo. I'm a chaser of the sun and everything in between. Um, I'm sitting here in this moment, bathing in the love of my ancestors, and I am passionate about a reimagined world that is free for all beings, particularly for children, free from harm and free from militarization and destruction. I realize, as Megan just described, that this moment has been particularly stressful. The results of the presidential elections left many in shock and with despair. But I think I am sitting here today in the traditions of Black liberation and remembering for myself and reminding others that the transformative change that needs to take place has been beyond electoral politics. It's often been in the disruptions and civil disobedience. It's been in the wrestling and the denial of our labor and the strikes of those before us. It's been in the campaigns. It's been in the actions of Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, and many before us. And I think that is something that I have wrestled with as an early childhood educator, as an advocate. And I feel proud to say that the most important work that I have done, I believe, is organizing every single day with young children, families and colleagues, early childhood educators, particularly those who are practitioners and get to see the connections between our day-to-day practices and the reimagined world and our constant questioning of this, why are we here? What is our purpose? What is the purpose of school? And what is the purpose of education? Beyond a role for us to just indoctrinate children to be consumers, to become workers in the capitalistic grind, what about the space of a school to be for resistance and revolutionary practices and so forth? So beyond electoral politics, I learned a long time ago that I wanted our children to have agency over their bodies. I wanted them to have voice and power. And what does that look like? How do we cultivate a culture, not only the physical space, but the social and emotional space where children are seen and heard and loved and embody a sense of belonging, where they recognize their differences and find joy and see their interdependence, interconnections with each other. And how do we celebrate that? One of our practices at the school has been to honor their relationships with each other, but beyond the human relationships, they're more than human relationships. We recognize that we are on the ancestral land of the Muskogee people. We recognize their forced displacement and recognize their existence today and the ongoing struggles for earth, land, and water. We honor the Africans and their presence on this land before enslavement as traders, but beyond that, their hands that have nurtured this land. So what we've done with a lot of intentionality is recognizing that this space, this land needs healing. So part of that has been in collaboration with the children to have community gardens and to plant fruit-bearing trees and to really honor our connections in a way that I think as I grew up, it was a concrete jungle. So in recognizing the children's um, connections with the earth and planning around that and celebrating that, we also recognize their deep connection to what's happening beyond our walls in the forest next to us and in the communities, our global communities as well. So I'll share with you just a really short story about children agencies and community to take action and to disrupt in their efforts to save a local forest called the Weelaunee Forest. When our community found out the plans of our city to build one of the largest, at the time, militarized police training facilities, we were astounded. We were astounded that we were going to disrupt and cause harm to one of the largest remaining urban forests in a neighborhood that was surrounded by working Black and poor folks, in a community in a state that incarcerates and imprisons more folks than probably any other state in this world. And so we carry that within our heart. Again, how do we create in our own practices a reimagined world? We shared the plans with the children, and their response was swift. Do the people know? Do the people know? And I have to admit, it was a little bit heartbreaking to hear that story or hear the children's response of do the people know, because many did. But we had become in many ways disconnected from our own roots until we commodified earth and the treasures of this earth. And so we said, no, what should we do? And so the children said, we need to tell the people. We need to tell the people. We asked them, how can we tell the people? They said, we need to write signs. And so the children were with us as co-conspirators. And so they sent invitations to other schools to join them in a rally to save the Weelaunee Forest. They sent messages to Grant Park Cooperative Preschool and their director. They sent messages to the Nest Nursery and their children and so forth. And so we were able to organize with children and families one of the largest rallies that our movement has experienced, with over a couple hundred folks taking the streets and children leading and chanting, "Don't cut down the trees, don't cut down the trees." And our children continued their efforts and their play and saw connections of the stories between what was happening to the Weelaunee Forest and the stories of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and the possibilities of ongoing incarceration, because those stories were part of and the culture of our school. So we also were with children to realize that the chanting was not enough, that we needed to move beyond that because it didn't produce, the people weren't necessarily listening. So we went to the city council. We made appointments with the mayor. I share a little bit of our journey and a little bit of the story of that school to say that one of the things that I'm realizing is in this moment in time and where we're at, we're being called to build, as Bell Hooks describes, communities of resistance. That in this moment of gender and racial disparities, that we hold a significant power as early childhood educators in our classrooms to make shifts in how we practice and how we engage, how we have conversations with families, to have what we call brave conversations. We're inviting families, even in this moment, to draw and visualize with us what is the reimagined world that they want. And how are we going to organize ourselves? How are we going to make sacrifices to address the racial disparities or gender disparities, to prepare ourselves for the storm that has been brewing, but we recognize that fascism is all too well here and in this moment. And again, so not only is it our role to resist and to disrupt, but from a place of radical love, to create the communities that we so desire. I remember the election results and the days and the feelings, and I remember singing to a group of friends and then sharing with the children. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed up on freedom. I sang to them again. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed up on freedom. And I invite you here as we continue these conversations with Megan and Ijumaa to think about the challenges that we are faced, to think about the ways in which we are showing up with courage and the tangible ways that we can make shifts in our practices, in our classrooms, in our communities. How can we show up for our members of our community who are unhoused or experiencing food insecurity? How can we show up for our members of our community who are experiencing incarceration and the violence of capitalism? So I say that again, honored in this moment to be here with all of you, having these conversations and sharing just a little bit of our own story, and invite you all to be part of these ongoing stories and journey together. And I leave just these words of Bell Hooks resonate so often with me when she says, one of the most vital ways to sustain ourselves is by building communities of resistance, places where we know we are not alone. How can we as early childhood educators build communities of resistance? And so with that, I thank you again for this moment in time to be with you all. I turn the page over to Ijumaa, who I love so very much and who's guided and challenged us. I forgot to add that in.
Hi, Rukia. I know we're on the show, we're on a time limit. Hi everyone, I'm Ijumaa Jordan. And if you can't tell, I'm very excited to listen to Rukia, who I can listen to all day, every day, and to be here with Megan. And yeah, I'm just really, really excited to be here. And I've been thinking about courage and thinking about what that means as early childhood educators of being in the field. As a person who is currently a mentor, an early childhood consultant, I work with directors and classroom teachers, and I get invited to sit with children and, and think about what the challenges are and how to take those challenges on while we're standing in our power. And I'm just really feeling called to remind us that this is our time to stand in our power. That I know that for some, the early childhood culture is to be nice and to be sweet and don't make a ruckus. And that time is over. No more Miss Nice. That we have to stand in our power to not only survive, but to protect and to thrive in the fascism and and all the political and authoritism. Is that the word? You know what I mean? Because, we're going to have a fight in front of us. And that's not to scare anyone or to fearmonger, but this is the time to stand on our values and say, if we are advocates for children, if we believe in supporting families, then this is the time to stand up, to be in that community of resistance and to build those communities. If you're not already in community, this is the time to get into the community. I wanted to share one story about the before times and the first political time with you know who, with that person, and some of just the bad things that people did, the acting out that we saw on the news and on social media, the hate, the trolling, and how that affected the practitioners and the children in my community. I got a phone call from a teacher that had come to a workshop that I did at that point, like a couple of years ago, but she kept my number, she kept in touch. And she said, I really need to talk to you because I have a problem. I was like, okay. So I talked to her, and this was around the time when white supremacists were marching and having those tiki torches. Some people might have blocked it out, but when what happened in their classroom and during outside time, that two boys, a white child and a Mexican-American light-skinned boy child, they took those long shovels and they were marching around, and they focused on two girls that were sitting in the sandbox playing, and they were like, you go home, you go back to Mexico. And the teacher that called me, she intervened and was like, what's happening here? And the two girls were like, we were telling them to go away because we didn't want to hear that. They were being mean. And her co-teacher came over and was like, oh, they were just playing, you know, boys will be boys. And that didn't quite sit well with the teacher. So she had called me because they had a meeting with the teacher, the teacher and the co-teacher, with the director. And the director was like, you know, I don't think that you should have intervened. You know, if the girls said to go away, that should have been enough. And that didn't work for that teacher, because she intervened, and in talking to the children, they were recreating the hate that they saw on the news. Like, they had just saw a clip of it, and like they saw these people being powerful and using their voices, and that had to be addressed. So part of the intervention is that I met with the director, the teacher, and the parents, and we talked through that. And it was, you know, resolved, and we came to an understanding. And the teacher said that she was just so grateful that she had someone to be in community with, someone that she could talk to about it that would actually support her, even when the people that she directly worked with didn't help and weren't cooperative and had very different values and ideas. So I share that story to remind us that part of being in community is sometimes it might not always be with the people that you directly work with, and sometimes you might have to go outside, but also bringing that in to know that there can be change, that you don't have to just let things slide. And that does take courage. That does take being vulnerable, right? Because the teacher that called me, she had already been in the field 20, 30 years. She was a lead teacher. And she had to like come to me and say, you know what, I don't know what to do about this. And it does take vulnerability for us to be in community with each other and to make the change that we need. So my call to action is to think about what you can take a stand on, what you can speak out on. And it might not be something that happens with the children. Maybe it's something that's happening in the community that's affecting children and family. It has, like, thinking about what's happening today in Supreme Court. Are you educating yourself around that? do you know how to support the trans people in your life and in your community? And what our plan is going to be going forward, because it's coming, right? That it's going to be less and less safe for a lot of people. And it might, you might be in a privileged place, but taking that privilege to be your protection and standing up for what is right. So that's what I wanted to offer. Thank you for your attention and your thoughtfulness. And I think my time might be up because I see Megan's face. And I will turn it over to her. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Vestie. That was so powerful. What an important story. Thank you. I also want to say thank you to the folks in the chat. Someone named David Johnson wrote, "The direct confrontation principle. The path to equity requires direct confrontations with inequity, with interpersonal, institutional, cultural, and structural racism and other forms of oppression. Equity approaches that fail to directly identify and confront inequity play a significant role in sustaining inequity," from Paul Gorski. It's a perfect transition to where I wanted to start today. Like Rukia and Ijumaa mentioned, the challenges we are likely to face in the next 4 years under an incoming Trump presidency did not start with this incoming administration. This has been a long and protracted struggle against fascism in our communities and at the national level. And so I want to share an example of that for us to unpack together. Can somebody let me know if that screen share is working? Maybe in the chat, someone's responding. Yes, okay, fantastic. So what we're about to watch is a short recording from a Senate hearing in 2023. And the Senate hearing is titled, "Solving the Childcare Crisis, Meeting the Needs of Working Families and Childcare Workers." The person who's speaking is a senator from Oklahoma named Mark Wayne Mullins, and the book he's holding is called Our Skin, A First Conversation About Race, by me and my friend Jessica Rowley. Let's see what happens. And keep in mind that idea of direct confrontation.
I have a book here in front of me called Our Skin that has been endorsed by NACI. And I'm going to read exactly what this book says. You guys might find it interesting. A long time ago, way before you were born, a group of white people made up an idea called race. They sorted people by skin color and said that white people were better, smarter, prettier, and they deserved more than everybody else. This would be taught if we socialize our pre-K system. This would be taught.
Do you disagree with that findings in the book?
1,000%. How about we teach Jesus loves me? How about this? In teaching Jesus loves the little children, the lyrics go, red and yellow, black and white, they're all precious in our sight. Now, which one would you think would be better? I'll ask everybody on the panel, which is better to teach? This, that is a story that was made up to teach our kids, 3-year-olds who have no idea what race is, now all of a sudden is being taught that white people said this as a truth. Someone point at me that this being a truth, that white people developed race, that white people developed that all of a sudden that was our word that we developed. By the way, I'm Cherokee, Native American. I think we have experienced a little bit of racism before in my life, Chairman.
Senator Mullins.
So I ask everybody on the panel, which one is better to teach? This or the Jesus Loves Me lyrics? Ma'am, I'll start down here. Just tell me which one. I don't have time for an explanation.
What I'll tell you, Senator Mullen, is that what children in these early years develop
I
their
didn't ask
identity.
the question.
It's
the question is which
it's
one do you
important that our
think is better to-
classrooms are.
I'm just asking which one is better to
Let her
teach.
answer the question, please.
My question is this.
She will
Which
answer
one
it
is
if she
better?
sees fit.
Which one is better?
It's important that children's identity
That's
and
not
language
answering my
and
question.
culture are recognized.
That's not answering my question.
And that's what creates
Ma'am,
strong
that-
executive
okay,
function.
if
and
you don't
good
want to answer my
development.
question, that's fine. Let's move on down the panel. Which one is better to be taught? This book or the Jesus Loves Me lyrics? That says everybody's skin doesn't matter. They're all precious in His sight.
I think it's important to teach that all children are seen and valued for who they are, and that's
So,
what
but when you
Macy's
teach
research
this,
is
don't you
about.
think that other people are start saying that white kids are to blame?
I think it's
It's
important.
exactly what they're going to teach. It's exactly what it is, ma'am.
I disagree. First, it is important that we teach Jesus. And
Absolutely.
Jesus is what we teach.
So which one is
But
better?
the
to teach
reality
this?
is-
So do you think this is
Could
the
she
right
answer
thing?
the question, please?
I don't want reality. I'm asking the question, which one is better? That's exactly what it is.
Got it on tape.
Misspoke. So what I'm saying is which one is which?
All right. So I share that, and I see lots of commentary in the chat. Senator Mullins is infuriating, and he's wrong. And what I want to pay attention to is what was our response? The three panelists who responded are representatives of us, the early childhood profession. Lauren Hogan, for example, it is literally her job. She's the policy person at NACY, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and it's her job to respond to these kinds of attacks. I'm a progressive educator, so I'm not into grading, but if I was a grading person, I would maybe give their responses a C+. Not bad, but not excellent. And that's what I want us to learn how to do in these coming years, is we're all going to need to develop the capacity to respond with courage and clarity when we are attacked in that kind of way.
I have a book here
Thanks
in
for hanging in with the tech difficulties. If you all have been listening to this podcast, you hopefully listened to the last episode in which the new policy person at NACY and the policy people in related sibling organizations talked about their plans for how they're going to navigate the current moment that we're in policy-wise. And the NACY person told a story about being asked in the elevator at the recent NACY conference by an early childhood professional about what NACY is going to do about Project 2025. I am that person who came up to him in the elevator at the conference and asked about Project 2025. And I want to use this opportunity to tell you why I asked. I asked because for me, of course, I care about incremental increases in CCDBG funding, but that's not enough. I have been, before this current moment, fundamentally dissatisfied by this abusive budget dance we do, where it's federal and state legislatures threaten to cut funding. We mobilize our communities and fight back to hold on to the already paltry and inadequate funding that we have. I feel a mandate to actually deliver on the vision that we as a field articulated in the Power to the Profession initiative. And I appreciated what the representative from 0 to 3 said. We need to understand that advocating for early childhood education isn't just advocating for funding for childcare, because young children are immigrants, young children are trans, young children are impacted by poverty and food insecurity, the issues that Rukia and Ijumaa talked about. So when we advocate at the federal level, we need to be advocating about the lives of young children, their families, and their communities as whole human beings. And I would also argue what's at stake in the current moment policy-wise at the federal level is the state of democracy itself. And I want to live in a country that there is at least some semblance of democracy. I think that's good for children and families and the early childhood profession. We are in a moment now where there is, as Ijumaa and Rukia mentioned, rising fascism in the United States and globally. Of course, not everybody in the MAGA movement is a fascist. Some of them are authoritarians. Some of them are just conservatives. But the point is, we now have in the executive branch, the House and the Senate, and the judicial branch, members of a movement where they are cool hanging out with fascists. And that is something that I think we should be really concerned about. We're also seeing the rise in anti-democratic groups like Moms for Liberty at the local level, in our library board, in our school board. And this is, when we look at the history of the country, something that we can anticipate. Some people have called it a white lash. We are in the reaction to the largest movement for Black liberation, the movement for Black lives, that our planet has ever known. And so we've got to do something about it. We'll send a link to a podcast in the follow-up that gets a lot more into the details of defining fascism, understanding the MAGA movement, helping us understand what types of collaborations might defeat fascists moving forward. But for now, I just want to say that denial, somehow saying like, no, everything's going to be fine, the rule of law will prevail, or bright-siding, I just choose hope and optimism in this moment without actually any grounding in a real plan, is not enough. We know when we look at United States history that our culture and our institutions and our laws are actually quite accommodating of pretty extreme forms of racial and class-based inequity. And history is not linear. There is nothing to say that we will not go back and experience some of these more extreme forms unless we are unified in our resistance. Why do I say this? Because I know, as James Baldwin taught us, that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So there are some things that we look at when we get a sense of what any president will do. Of course, no one can predict the future, but these are some things we look at to get a sense of what we might anticipate. We look at their track record. So we look at what did they do the last time they were in office. We can expect at the very best that the policy we're going to see out of the federal government will be at least as bad as it was last time Trump was president. We also look at what people say on the campaign trail and we take them at their word. Trump campaigned on an agenda that he said he's going to cut money to any school that's pushing critical race theory, transgender, quote unquote, insanity, or other quote unquote inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children. And we look at their policy proposals. If you have not yet looked at or looked into Project 2025, please give it a read. It is essential for understanding what we are likely up against in the next 4 years. We also understand in the United States, we have a systems of checks and balances. But as I mentioned, Republicans have the House and the Senate and the judicial branch in addition to the executive branch. That's a lot of consolidated power to move what they want to move, even if it will be clunky. And we also look at whether there are city or state level officials in government who are willing to collaborate with this federal agenda. And we know that we have that. Greg Abbott in Texas is saying, yes, Trump, I am ready to collaborate with you in family separations and mass deportations. They're ready to move on that agenda from day one. We also look at their appointments. Ultimately, it will be people who are holding those jobs that enact these policies. And we're seeing the lead author of Project 2025 heading up the budget office. And we're seeing a lady from WWE, World Wrestling, heading the Department of Education. Those should be concerning. I also want to say it would be silly to expect that this time is going to be the same as last time. Last time they took office a little bit by surprise. They were surprised themselves that they won. This time it's not a surprise. They've had 4 years to develop a clear policy agenda, and not just a policy agenda, but a whole apparatus to be able to reschedule federal employees and hire people who are willing to move on that agenda from day one. If you didn't care, let's just pretend you don't care actually about trans people, or you don't care about immigrants, and you just care about early childhood policy. Project 2025 also calls for the elimination of Head Start wholesale. That is something we should be concerned about. And let's be real, there have been movement strategies that have pushed forward major federal investments in early childhood education, namely the Breathe Act, which came out of the movement for Black Lives. And organizations like NACI did not get in line and follow that policy agenda. There are some early childhood educators who did, This is a photo of Ayanna Presley in Massachusetts holding proudly a copy of Our Skin at the Ellis Early Learning Center. So there were some, but this time around, we're going to need to do something differently. I realize I'm about at time, so I'm going to close out with one more story. This is a photo of 2018. In 2018, I was on the NAEYC governing board and I attended the Public Policy Forum in Washington, D.C. We were sitting in Anaheim in a conference center and listening to people rattle off kind of basic policy and advocacy 101 stuff. I was honestly a little bit bored. I'm not only a NAEYC member, I'm a member of a community-based organization. And through that membership in my community-based organization, I knew there were movement people on the Hill that day advocating for immigrant justice and planning a giant March for Dreams. So I asked my colleagues who were there with me at the Public Policy Forum, who's willing to play hooky with me, leave Public Policy Forum and show up on the steps of the Capitol in support of immigrants. And I couldn't bring everybody with me, but I did bring some folks who are now NAEYC staff and running for the governing board alongside me. We can keep doing that. So Megan's hot take, I think our existing strategy was already pretty weak. I think we need a bigger vision with bolder demands and a much broader coalition of people if we actually want to deliver on the Power of the Profession initiative. This single issue strategy and an advocacy strategy has not worked yet, and it will not work in the next 4 years. What we need to do is mobilize our 60,000 members and actually organize the kind of work that Rukia is modeling for us in Atlanta. And I would also say our existing defensive strategy has been fairly weak. And the strategies we have are going to need to be strengthened because this time is not going to be the same as it was the first time around. We need to fight book bans. There's an organization called Run for Something that is fighting Moms for Liberty in school boards across the country. Look them up. We must resist scapegoating and disposability narratives, and we need to do it out loud in the streets. We need to say trans is good, actually. We need to stand up for immigrants. We need to stand up for the Palestinian people. This is a photo of some kids in my community. Okay, one last video because I can't stop. I want to get the voices of the kids. This is an example of young children taking action for justice in their community.
I thought Jews were on the side of justice. Senator, why won't you fight harder for peace? That's right.
I'll hold it if you want to read it.
Why can't Palestinian kids play like me?
Yeah. Very important question. All right. Ezra. Okay, Ezra. All right, Ez.
Why are we sitting on the street? Why are you still sending bombs to Gaza?
Very important question. And our final question from Rosie.
Yay, Rosie! Why are you giving money to Israel to hurt people in Palestine?
What's going on?
All right, there's more to say. I'll stop there for now. Thank you, Valora, for being flexible on time.
Absolutely. So we had a whole year of talking about showing up with courage. I want to ask Rukia and Ijumaa to join us right now. We've had a whole year of talking about showing up with courage. We heard just now somebody say, we're standing with our ancestors, listening to us, and we're standing in their traditions. We have people asking, what's the purpose of schooling? Last month, we talked about what is our policy agenda going forward. We had 3 national organizations talk about the policy agenda. What we're hearing today is that single issue work doesn't work. And this is what, children have health needs. Children are immigrants, as was stated. It's a broad area, not just our very important work in childcare. And so how do we move this agenda forward? We've had a whole year of talking about showing up with courage. I'm so amazed by the work that you all are doing. But I really want to emphasize that I think when some people listen to the three of you, they think, I can't do that. How do people stand in their power? How do they stand up where they are in their situation? What words of wisdom can you say to people who are listening about what they can do and how they can get involved right now to stand up for children and families and our profession?
Yeah, I think like we're not special, like we're great. But part of it is being in community. Part of it is like not, you don't have to do it alone. And, you know, everyone's human. I don't always feel like saying anything. Like, I just want to take a nap because I'm tired. But when you're in community and you are grounded in your values and know there's your ethical responsibility in early childhood to do this work, then you get up and do it. And you have people holding your hand, rubbing your back, bringing you some snacks so you're not angry, right? Giving you pep talks. And you get out there and do the work. Like, don't try to do it alone. Like, find your people. We can be your people. Like, with us. Megan, a whole list of places she can send you.
So for those of you who want to ask a direct question to these three panelists, there's going to be a link in the chat in just a few moments, and you can join us in the after show to talk with them. Joining in community is a really important point that the CAYL Institute constantly makes in its fellowships and in its work, that we have to think together, then we have to act together, we have to move together, and that what we've heard from the legacy leaders we've heard from this year in our series of Showing Up with Courage is that they also pay a price for doing that. Without really calling the names, you can listen to the whole series. I mean, there are people now who are quite celebrated, but in their moment of doing what they did, even people within the field gave them some trouble. Let's put it like that. What else can you say about showing up in communities of resistance as we work with children and families, particularly you, Rukia, since you're modeling that in the work that you're doing every day?
Yeah, I love the words that Ijumaa just offered of like being in community and not being alone. I want to acknowledge why the hesitation, why the reservation to get engaged. Many of us have spent a lot of times in public schools in different settings that have told you don't matter, your voice is not important. They've done things to shut you down. And so this is an invitation, this moment, this time, and we're asking you to reach in within yourselves, to call on the love of your ancestors, to be in community with us. And there are people within your community, close to you or physically far, who share the same concerns, who are wrestling with the same things. Find those people. When you talk to families, cultivate a culture where you're having conversations with your families. How are you greeting them in the morning? How are they doing? How are families raising children in the midst of a capitalistic grind? What are you doing to support and show up for them? And then when you cultivate a culture that their conversations can take place, that they know that we are a community, we're in partnership together to raise your child. That is some of the most profound organizing that takes place. It's always begun with children. When we've talked about harm that has happened to people, you want to wipe out a race or harm a group of people, you take children from the home, you harm the child. So it starts there in generating that culture, again, having those conversations with families. So it might be a monthly get together. In the afternoon, maybe find ways to provide childcare or food if you can, and start the conversation. What is your vision of a reimagined world? What are the things and issues that are speaking to your heart? How can we be in community and support you? But like what has been said is, don't do it alone. And I think also as a field, we have this notion of family engagement. Our families are yearning for the support. They are in partnership with you. So organize with them. Sometimes you're looking for a politician or something. Organize with the people within your schools.
Mhm. Yeah, we have a great thinker who said once, cast down your bucket where you are, right? He said in different contexts, but I think that's a very powerful message that the work that you can do is the work where you are. You know, Megan, one of the things that, you know, many of us, because we're in a low paid field and because there's so many messages about the value of who we are, what we do, many people are just surviving in this field. I know at the CAYL Institute right now, we're the only Good Jobs Challenge grantee in the United States. We're preparing new people for the field and we're upskilling people who are already in the field. You know, a lot of people are just trying to get through it every day, but there's a really important part of what we're doing where we have to thrive, resist, move forward. How do we get out of that getting by moment? We're just going to get by. We're going to check the boxes. How can we move beyond that?
What a brilliant question. What comes to mind for me is today is I believe, the anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott. Those were folks who were also just getting by. You know, I'm thinking about what Rukia said about abolition and ancestors. When I think about abolition in the United States, I think about people like Frederick Douglass, right? Like, talk about underpaid. He was literally enslaved and still found a way because he was committed to art. He loved me enough, didn't even know I could possibly exist generations later, but loved me enough to fight for a world where maybe my life could be fundamentally different than the life that he lived. And so I feel like connecting to ancestors and learning from, you know, like when I started in this work, I was like, this couldn't have been, I couldn't be the first person on earth who ever thought there were racial and gender disparities in early childhood education. Let me go find my ancestors. And I found you, Valora, and I followed you, and I read your books, and I found Ijumaa at a NACI conference, and I followed around, and I made her be my best friend. And she connected me to people like Rukia. So I think, you know, the wise words that have already been shared, like find your people and connect, find your political home or build it. Maybe it's your center.
Yeah, you know, we have a term we've used in the CAYL Institute called, you know, encouraging people to be disruptive innovators. The reason I talk about disruptive innovation is because it's not just being disruptive or trying to do what has been done, trying to sustain what is there. It also has to be a piece of innovation with that, so that we are learning from what our legacy leaders have done, but taking it to the next level. That's why we're so excited to have you three as a panel, as we have spent a year learning from our legacy leaders about how they stood with courage, but we still have to stand with courage. We still have to show up with courage, and that requires innovation, not repeat, right? How are we innovative?
Beautifully put.
Yeah, we've got to be innovative. We got to think some new things. Just like that saying, Kofa, we look back, but we're moving forward. I want to encourage each and every one of you who's listening to join the special post show that we have. If you want to ask a question of these three panelists, please do. I also want to remind you that we send after each webinar a list of resources. This was a conversation, but we need to keep educating ourselves and take a deep dive and learning and joining community. In each and every one of our webinars, we provide you with resources to dig deeper. We also provide you with the email addresses of our presenters. And so this is a way of moving forward. When we come back in 2025, we're going to start a new series. It's going to be a new series called The Way Forward. It's going to talk about the empowerment and resilience that we have and how we move forward. So please join us in 2025 as we talk about this way forward. We look forward to sending you the list of resources, and we ask you, if you're interested, to click on the link to join the conversation we're about to have offline. And I also, as we come to the end of the year, I want to give my deep, deep thought and appreciation to all of the CAYL staff who make this webinar possible, whose brave thinking helps us come up with the topics and the speakers. Thank you to the CAYL Institute staff, and thank you to all of you who have been our supporters over the years, and especially this past year. Good night, and I'll see you in the post show. Bye-bye.